Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Litvitational 3, which took place yesterday. And this event was essentially as stacked as Cirque du Soleil coming in at an A+ here and was an absolute banger to watch for our top 16 finishers, which was all of them. You're going to have Snow, Beast Mode Paul, Epic Gabriel, and kaninabe in 13th. Spargo, Zomba, Doramigi, and Peabnut in 9th. In 7th, you got Kola and Hurt. 5th is Luis and Miya. 4th is Tweek. 3rd is T. 2nd is Lima. And winning the entire thing for the 3rd time in a row is Light. Starting off with our 13th place finisher, specifically with Epic Gabriel, and he was our qualifier through the LCQ, and unfortunately, he was the only one at the tournament that wasn't able to take a set, but to his credit, he had a, really difficult pool, especially for Rob, considering that he had to play Snow, Spargo, and Kola. Managed to take a game off Spargo, which is nice, and then in the main bracket, he has the misfortune of playing Hurt, who, spoilers, immediately beats Zomba after that, so honestly, I just think this was a really unlucky bracket for Epic Gabriel, and if things were a little bit differently, I do think that he could have gone further. You know, there's players at this tournament that I think he had a pretty good chance against that he just never got to play, and I guess we'll never know how those results would have unfolded, but at the end of the day, not the end of the world for Epic Gabriel. This is just really good practice for coming into Cirque du CFL, and to be honest, I really think he could do well at that tournament, to the point where I could see him in the top 8. The next 13th place finisher I want to talk about is kaninabe, and he also had a tough pool. Everyone at this tournament had a tough pool, but he had Tweek, Zomba, and Beast Mode Paul, and considering those are all players who have pretty good records versus Light, Beast Mode Paul, I think has a 3-2 record, or 2-3 record in Light's favor, but still pretty solid there. Zomba is going back and forth, and then Tweek goes back and forth with him. So those are all opponents that you don't really want to see as kaninabe, and he had beaten Tweek prior to this event, but Tweek looked really competitive this time around. Was able to beat him 3-0. Same thing as Zomba, but you do have kaninabe getting a 3-0 win over Beast Mode Paul, which is super impressive. As I just mentioned, Beast Mode Paul does really well against Light. Fox definitely has some issues against Hero, just these massive hitboxes that just make him explode. Offstage can also be extremely difficult, but you are a very smothering character. You do have that reflector for the magic, and it ends up going into kaninabe's favor. Unfortunately, not enough to get him into the winner side of the bracket, and in the loser side of the bracket, he immediately has to play Miya, so yeah, that's definitely a little bit unlucky for a Fox player. He does manage to take a game, and he honestly looked really competitive in that set, but he ends up falling 3-1. You're also going to have Beast Mode Paul in 13th place from the same group. He's going to lose to kaninabe 3-0, like I mentioned. He loses a very competitive Game 5 set with Zomba, which I believe was a reverse 3-0 from Zomba against Beast Mode Paul's Sephiroth. So very impressive that he was able to take 2 games with Sephiroth, but just wasn't able to close it out, though he actually manages to close it out versus Tweek of all people. I think if Beast Mode Paul was going to beat anyone at this tournament, Tweek would have been like the last person that I guess, but he looked amazing in that set. He spaced around Monkey Flip extremely well, and he was able to get the win because of it. So huge props to Beast Mode Paul for that one. I think that's a really massive upset, one of the biggest ones of the tournament, and there was a lot at this tournament. But in the main bracket, he has the misfortune of running into doramigi right away, and once again goes up 2-0, but gets reversed 3-0, just couldn't close out the set there. And Mimin is, I think, a tough character for Hero. There are some things that are good for Hero in that matchup. You know, you can edge guard Mimin. The spells are great. The buffs are amazing as well. But it's just really hard for you to actually read the menu when there's an arm coming at you from, like, more than halfway across the stage. So, Beast Mode Paul, gotta be feeling really good about that Tweek win, but still gets last at the end of the day. And our final 13th place finisher is also going to come from a pool that we've already seen before, and that is going to be Snow from the Epic Gabriel pool. He gets that 3-0 over Epic Gabriel, as I mentioned, but he ends up losing 3-0 to both Spargo and Kola, which are definitely tough draws as a Mario player, especially Spargo. That's like the last guy on Earth, honestly, that I would want to see. I don't know how you deal with that cloud back here. And in the main bracket, he has the misfortune of running into peabnut. Now, I don't actually think that's a bad matchup for Mario. In fact, I think that's a winning matchup for Mario if I had to give it winning to either character. It's just unfortunate because peabnut is like really good at this game, and Snow is just not ready for the matchup this time around. I know there's a couple Mega Man players in Japan. You know, Repo is very good, but I don't think they're even close to the level of peabnut now. I feel like he is significantly the best Mega Man player in the world, and this is a very intricate character. There's a lot of small details that you need to know, and Snow just wasn't ready this time around. On to our 9th place finisher, starting off with the aforementioned peabnut. He was in the pool of Light, Hurt, and T, and unfortunately for him, he was not able to get a win in that pool. Loses 3-0 to Light, 3-1 to T, and then I believe gets reverse 3-0'd by her. A bit of a heartbreaker there. And I do think that is a set that if they were to play again, he would come out on top. I think Mega Man just does really well against Snake, but Hurt made some amazing adaptations. Definitely got to give him credit there. And because of that, he ends up in the loser side of the bracket where he does get that 3-0 over Snow, like I mentioned, but then has to fight Luis right after that, who is not only playing on a heater at this event, but I also think that Palutena just does really well against Mega Man. So I don't really have a ton to say about peabnut's run at this event. He plays solid. Most of the sets that you would expect him to lose, he does end up losing. Still gets that super solid win over Snow, and he should be feeling pretty confident coming into that main circ bracket. You're also going to have doramigi finishing in 9th place, and I know I've said this before in this video, but this pool was, like, so difficult for him. He had Miya, which he ends up losing 3-0, which is, understandable. It's Miya, and it's a game to watch. He led Lima, who he ends up losing to in a game 5, which is honestly pretty impressive that he managed to make it that competitive, because I do think that Bayonetta does really good against Min. Your offstage gameplay is just so strong, both defensively and offensively. You can't make it back to the stage as Min. You can't keep that Bayo off stage. It's just such a nightmare matchup. Maybe not a nightmare matchup, but not a fun one, and not one that doramigi prevailed in. And then the final person in his pool is going to be Luis. He does manage to take a game there, but I just think Palutena just smothers Min as a character, and that's not something that she's usually amazing at, but because Min doesn't have too many amazing get off me tools, she's not the best close quarters combat character. That is when Palutena is going to thrive. And I also think Palutena's recovery is pretty good against Min, aside from the 2-frame window, just because you're just not existing for a second. You can't get clipped by an arm if you're not there. So Luis ends up winning that one. doramigi gets set in the loser side. He gets that 3-2 win over Beast Mode Paul, like I mentioned. And with the language barrier, which I assume is there for doramigi, it's even more impressive. But then he has the misfortune of running into Kola, does manage to take a game, and in that game, it was very clear what the win conditions are. He was just getting edge guards like crazy, but Kola just overwhelmed him, which makes a lot of sense. He's one of the fastest players in the world on one of the fastest characters in the game versus Min. It's just a bad combination. Next up in 9th place is going to be Zomba. This is the first person who actually had a good pool for himself. He gets that 3-0 win over kaninabe, has so much experience versus Light, makes a ton of sense. 3-2 win over Beast Mode Paul. He does have to reverse 3-0 it, but he manages to reverse 3-0 it against that Sephiroth, and he does lose in a Game 5 set versus Tweek. So still managing to take it to Game 5, but that's really more so Tweek just like playing really well at this event, having preparation for that matchup. So he gets into the main bracket where he has to fight Lima right away, and he ends up losing that one Game 5. Pretty difficult matchup for Rob, so it does make sense that he would drop there. And in the losers bracket, he gets one of the last person on the entire planet that he would want to see, and that is going to be her. In the past, you have had Zomba struggle a little bit against Snake, and while I don't think that's as much of a problem right now, it is still definitely a issue. I do think Snake has some pretty strong tools against Rob as a character, and Zomba just wasn't able to figure it out this time around. So 9th place for him, definitely not the placement that he wanted, but also he only lost to Tweek and Hurt and Lima. Those are all amazing losses. It's not going to be hurting his season too much, and I would be very shocked if he didn't top 8 the main bracket. Speaking of shocked, though, our final 9th place finisher is going to be Spargo, and he starts off with a flawless pool. He beats Kola and Epic Gabriel 3-1, as well as beating Snow 3-0 to start in the winner's side of the bracket. But something about these invitationals midway through the season, they're just a curse for him, because once he gets into the main bracket, he immediately loses out. He loses to T in the winner's side 3-1. And prior to this, he had a 100% win rate on T, but I believe in their previous sets, it was mainly Pac-Man from T. This time around, it was all Kazuya, and the Kazuya ends up working really well. I think Kazuya honestly does pretty well against Cloud, and, evidently he does. In the loser side of the bracket, he actually ends up running into Miya, which on paper is an amazing matchup for Spargo. I don't believe he's ever lost to him prior to this, and both Cloud and Aegis do really well against Game Watch, but notice how I said prior to this, because you have Miya beating Spargo 3-1, and it should be noted that you only had Spargo going Aegis at this event, and I'm honestly not sure why that is. Well, clearly he was just more confident in the Aegis in that matchup, but Cloud is also an amazing choice. I do think that if they were to play at Cirque, or just the next time that they play, you will at least see Spargo try out the Cloud, but huge props to Miya. Manages to get that big upset. Can Spargo still be the best player in the world? Yes, absolutely. He only took losses to amazing players at this event and still got a couple really good wins under his belt, but he is going to have to perform at Cirque. On to our 7th place finisher, starting off with Hurt. He ends up losing 3-0 to T in the pools phase, which does make sense. He has been struggling a lot against Kazuya recently. I do think that Kazuya does pretty well against Snake, and I honestly wouldn't be super surprised if you saw Hurt trying out his Greninja again, but considering that he's kind of figured out the Min matchup on Snake, which is way harder than the Kazuya one, I definitely think that he can do it on Snake. It is just going to take time. He gets that reverse 3-0 over Peabnut, which is honestly one of his most impressive wins. I think the matchup's really hard for Snake, and then he ends up losing in a game Game 5 set to light, which was like one of the best sets of the tournament. Highly recommend that you watch that. Once he gets into the main bracket, he immediately beats 2 Rob players. The first one being Epic Gabriel, who managed to actually take a game off him. 3-0 Zomba to get into top 8, and once in top 8, runs into Miya. And same conversation that we've had before. Just a really unlucky draw for any Snake player to get the best game watch in the entire world. But 7th place for her, not the end of the world. Maybe was looking to get a little bit higher, but gets a couple of good wins under his belt. Really doesn't take any bad losses. And at the end of the day, the top 8 is still the top 8. And our other 7th place finisher is going to be Kola. And he has a pretty good bracket. He ends up getting 3-0 wins over both Snow and Epic Gabriel, only losing his run back to Spargo from LSI. And he ends up losing that one 3-1, but still playing extremely well, starting in the winner's side of the bracket. But he runs into Light right away and ends up losing that one 3-1. So Light also gets his revenge. They played at LSI. Kola wins that one. He wins the event. Now they play at this event. Light wins it, and he also wins the event. I guess whoever wins between them is just like the undisputed champion. But he goes down to the loser side, gets that 3-1 win over doramigi, like I mentioned. And once in the top 8, he has the misfortune of running into Luis, who is just playing phenomenally at this point. Just like fundamentally, his decision making was incredible, and especially when you're on a character like Palutena, you're just going to be thriving in that moment. So he ends up winning that one, or losing, I guess, that one 3-1. But really solid run from Kola. Was able to keep up that momentum from LSI, showing, hey, that's not a fluke. I'm here to stay in these top 8s, and I'm pretty confident he's also going to top 8 Cirque, because he looked really good here. On to the 5th place finisher, starting off with Luis, and he did really well in his pools phase. The only one that he ends up dropping a set to is going to be Miya, but he manages to take it to game 5 there. Absolutely could have gone into his favor, and if they were to play again, I would expect it to be just as close. I think Luis does really well against Game Watch. Palutena also does really well against Game Watch, and that set was just an absolute banger. He also gets a 3-1 win over Dormi and a 3-0 win over Lima as well. It's pretty impressive that he was able to complete that in a 3-0, especially considering how well Lima was playing at this event. But he manages to get into the winner's side of the main bracket, where he then ends up losing to Tweek 3-1. But the one game that he takes is with the Dr. Mario. That's right, he took the game with Dr. Mario. And honestly, I would argue that's more impressive than a Tweek win, but I digress. In the loser side of the bracket, he 3-0s peabnut to get into that top 8. I think that is a matchup where Palutena does pretty well. Gets that 3-1 win over Kola as well, but then he runs into T, and it's really, really hard to out-fundamental Kazuya as a character, especially as Palutena. I feel like Kazuya is like a perfect counter for Palu. Now, the Palu Vanish State is still really good against Kazuya, but just in the neutral, you know exactly what Palutena wants to do, and she's not going to be very coy about it, and it's so easy to just electric that forward air or electric that nair, and that's what ended up happening in that set. So a 5th place from Luis, played amazing at this event, was going for those reads, they were paying off, and I hope he just plays the same way in the main bracket. And the other 5th place finisher is going to come from the same pool, and that is going to be Miya. He gets that 3-2 win over Luis, like I mentioned. He gets a 3-0 win over Doramigi, which makes a lot of sense. Very dominant matchup for him. But he ends up losing 3-0 to Lima. And because Lima beat him 3-0, and Luis managed to take him to game 5, he actually ended up having a worse game count than Luis. So he ends up starting in the loser's side of the bracket, where he honestly probably was pretty happy about that, considering how he did. He gets a 3-1 win over kaninabe, which is definitely expected. Shouts to kaninabe for even taking a game. But then he gets a 3-1 win over Spargo, which is the most impressive upset of the tournament, in my opinion. That's just been such a dominant head-to-head for Spargo, and a really difficult matchup for both Game & Watch and Steve. But Miya made adjustments, looked really comfortable in that set, and he managed to get the dub. Huge props to him for that one. Once in the top 8, he gets that 3-1 win over Hurt. Just a difficult matchup there for Hurt. Something that he's definitely going to need to figure out. Maybe even go to Greninja for. I don't think that's the worst idea in the world, to at least just try it out, because it is a difficult matchup. You have to play a pretty much entirely different character as Snake. And then finally for Miya, he ends up actually losing 3-1 to Tweek, which was another one of these massive upsets that happened at this event. There was honestly a ton of them. But for Miya, I would be feeling like amazing about this event, because all that would matter to me is that Spargo win. And he also happened to get a win on Hurt, who was top 5, and Doramigi, who's probably going to be top 15 by the end of the season. So yeah, I'm sure he's feeling good about that as well. But that Spargo win is like, that's peak for him. Our 4th place finisher is going to be Tweek, and he was the first seed of his pool. He 3-0s kaninabe, does end up losing to Beast Mode Paul 3-1, but he gets that 3-2 win over Zomba, which he's got to be feeling amazing about, because Zomba's been giving him trouble for the past like 2 years, honestly, at this point. This is the first time that he's gotten a win on him since like Battle of BC, I believe, or Zomba also won. I just can't remember when they played before then. So huge props to Tweek for getting that win, and he did it with the Diddy Kong as well. In the main bracket, he beats Luis 3-1, though the Dr. Mario does take a game, so maybe a little bit of an analysis there. Then he ends up playing Light. It's a game 5 set, one of the best of the event. Whenever those guys play, it is always just a ton of fun, but he ends up losing that one. Then he fights Miya in the loser side of the bracket, and that's another demon for him. Hasn't been able to beat Miya before, and Game Watch is also a character that in the past, he says that he thinks Diddy Kong does well against Game Watch, but he just didn't know how to beat Game Watch. He really didn't have a solution. He definitely had a solution this time around. He was also able to beat Miya's Steve in the game. So Miya tried all the tricks. He tried the Game Watch, he tried the Steve, but Tweek was prepared. He did his homework, and he finally got the dub. Gotta be feeling amazing about that one. But unfortunately for him, he then runs into Pac-Man in T, which is just like a terrible, terrible draw to get as a Diddy Kong player. But hey, he already got his 2 wins over his demons. I'm sure he is very happy about this placement. Our third place finisher is going to be T, and it was a majority Kazuya for him at this event. Starting off in the pools phase where he 3-0s her with the Kazuya. He also gets a 3-1 win over Peabnut, and the only person he loses to in the pools phase is going to be Light, which he ends up losing 3-1, which does make sense. I think Fox Kazuya is one of those really interesting matches where they both just like destroy each other. Like, I'm talking, they are scrapping, they're throwing hands, people are taking 80% at the bare minimum per interaction, but Light just maybe hitting a little bit harder, and he also has mobility on his side, which definitely helps in a matchup like that, so he's gonna get the dub there. But still starting out in the winner's side for T, where he then immediately beats Spargo, which is like, you know, I don't have to tell you that's impressive. A 3-1 win over Spargo is incredible. He ends up losing to Lima right after that in the winner's side. Ends up getting sent down to fight Luis, who he beats in a 3-0, as well as beating Tweek in a 3-0. And I believe that was the only set that he used primarily Pac-Man for. He could have also used it for Peabnut. I don't remember at the top of my head, but he definitely used mainly Pac-Man up against Tweek. And then he actually ends up taking Lima to game 5 in their second encounter, but it's the same result at the end of the day, Lima coming out on top. So for T, really solid event from him. He only lost to the grand finalists. He got a bunch of top 10 wins, a couple top 5 wins as well, and he's just looked super, super solid. Like the best I've seen him in quite some time. In second place, you're going to have Lima, who I think also is in contention for the run of the tournament because he was just playing out of his mind. The only person he ends up losing to in the pools phase is going to be that 3-0 to Luis, but he takes Doramigi to game 5 as well as beating him, and he 3-0s Miya, by the way, which isn't like the craziest thing in the world for Lima to beat Miya. You know, Miya's lost to Bandetta players in the past. I think Bandetta was pretty good against Game Watch in their set. I believe it was Rising Grind, very competitive there. Could have gone into Lima's favor. Well, it went into Lima's favor this time around, and dominantly so, I should say, with a 3-0. So he starts in the winner's side of the bracket where he immediately beats Zomba in a game 5 set. Honestly, pretty big props to Zomba for managing to take it to game 5 because I think that's a really difficult matchup for Rob, especially when piloted by someone who played as well as Lima did at this event. In the winner's semifinals, he manages to 3-0 tease Kazuya to make it to the winner's finals where he has a game 5 set versus Light where he ultimately does end up losing that one. He beats T in a game 5 once again. He's had a lot of game 5s at this event to get into that grand finals, where then he loses 3-0 to Light. But I was so impressed by Lima at this event, specifically the way that he was playing aggressively, because when I was making this video, there's a couple matchups. I think the main ones were actually Doramigi and Light, where I said, if Lima wants to win this one, he's just going to have to play more aggressive than he normally does, because that's just how you have to play versus these characters. And he did that, and he played amazingly aggressive. It was so good, but it wasn't like he was just running in willy-nilly, not making choices. He was still very calculated. He still took his time. But he wasn't just hard camping you. He was making engagements. He was forcing you to make mistakes, and he was winning because of it. So massive props to Lima. I think he was playing unbelievably good at this event, and there was really only one person in the world who could have stopped it. And our big winner, the three-peat champion of the Litvitational, is going to be Light. He starts off the pools phase flawlessly with a 3-0 over Peabnut, 3-1 over T, and 3-2 win over her. I know I already said it, but you should watch that set. It is such a banger. Once in the main bracket, he gets a 3-1 win over Kola to get into the top 8, where he then beats Tweek in a game 5 set, another absolute banger, beats Lima game 5 in the grand finals, and I feel like once Light got to that grand finals, it was just over for everybody else. He just hit Cloud9 because he was playing unbelievably good. His mix of patience and pressure was amazing. His timing was amazing. His reactions, everything was just on point for Light at this event. And I really hope that he's able to carry it into Cirque Weekend. As we all know, after he won the last Invitational, didn't do as well. But after he won the first Invitational, he ends up getting second place at Cirque. So maybe he's going to average out to a 4th or 5th place at the event. Who knows? It's hard to tell. But all that really matters is that he managed to get the 3-peat. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as well. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!